there's been a bit of a ruckus this week because the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, has ordered and defended the deportation of a group of people to Jamaica on Wednesday, which included 29 serious foreign criminals. This, I find, initially at first glance, there'll be very few people who would disagree that the idea that if you are a foreigner in this country and you commit a serious offence, there's very few people who would disagree that they should be necessarily deported from here. But there are some issues surrounding these deportations that relate to one or two, as I understand it, and we'll find out more from a campaigner on the issue, who've actually been brought up here since a very, very young age, in one case as young as 5, which begs the question, is really should they be treated as a foreign criminal under those circumstances? But to hear more about this and learn more about this, I'm very pleased we've got Minnie Rahman, Campaigns Manager, Joint Counsel for the Welfare of Immigrants, on the phone, who's very much at the heart of this campaign. Minnie, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Nick.
You probably heard my very brief summary there, and I didn't want to go into too much detail because I think it is an issue that obviously you are all over. But I also want to try and understand the context of it, because a lot of people are talking about how objectionable some of these deportations are and linking it directly with Windrush and the Windrush scandal. I think that's slightly blurring the issue. But can you just, in a nutshell, factually summarise what's going on and what your case is?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 years ago, the Windrush scandal showed exactly how the hostile environment was leading to the wrongful detention and deportation of British people and people who have been in the country since they were children.
But this wasn't criminal offences, just to clarify. This was people who were not able to prove, who'd been there, who'd come to this country as late as long ago as the 60s, couldn't actually prove they'd been here, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. But in many cases, there were people who were deported on charter flights like this wrongfully.
Yep.
And the government promised after that scandal that they would learn the lessons from that scandal so the same mistakes wouldn't be made. And the way they did that was by commissioning a lessons learned review. So that review, we've been waiting for it for 2 years now. The government has a copy of it. The public has now seen a leaked copy of it. And that review specifically recommends that flights of this kind should not take place because the government should not be deporting people who've been in the country since they were children, even if they've committed a criminal offence.
And do they define a child here? I read somewhere that they're saying pretty much if someone was brought up in this country from under the age of 13, they shouldn't be treated as a foreign criminal.
Exactly. And under that sort of draft recommendation, it's not very clear what age, but it recommends the age 13. But we also mustn't forget that this isn't the only government review that makes that recommendation. The Stephen Shaw review makes the exact same recommendation, and that was commissioned in 2016 and updated in 2018. So very clearly, the government knows that this practice is unacceptable, and they're still doing it anyway. They know that the law needs to be revisited. And if they were really serious about learning the lessons of the Windrush scandal, they wouldn't schedule flights like this without publishing that review.
If what I'm reading here in front of me is accurate, there was, I believe that some reprieves were given where people were not immediately deported because it included, for example, a man who'd applied to remain in the UK under the Windrush scheme following the scandal, which shows, if you like, that they are, it would say to me that they are learning a lesson of Windrush, that someone who has not yet been able to prove they're here but has appealed that right shouldn't be deported. Is that an accurate report?
Well, I assume that is accurate because what the government often does is oversubscribe these flights. So they send out what's known as removal directions to more people than the flight can hold because they rely on the fact that people don't have clear access to lawyers. I mean, in this case in particular, the people in detention centres haven't had access to mobile phone signal for over a month, which means they haven't had, their rights to a lawyer, which will mean that there possibly are people who are deported on this flight without even having spoken to a professional lawyer. And I think that that is unacceptable for many reasons. Whether or not you committed a crime, should you be punished for that crime twice? especially where you are more British than you are foreign, separating people from their family and friends and actively disrupting any rehabilitation that they might need. I think the British public believes in second chances, and they don't agree with what happened to the Windrush generation, and they want to see that system reformed, and we're waiting for it.
I think on Windrush generation, you probably accurately summarise what the vast majority of the British public do think. But let me ask you where this, if you like, could end, because the argument about people being more British than foreign. So someone who may have been here for 20 years, who came in at the age of 25, and has lived here for 20, 30 years, and then commits a hideous crime, would be deported. Now, the question is, would you support that deportation in the case of these serious crimes that some of these, as I understand it, include rape and murder, or are you actually blanket against the idea of deporting foreign criminals, which, if so, is quite a hard case to win publicly, I imagine?
What I am saying is that if you have a life and if you've lived in the UK for most of your life and you've committed a crime and you have served your sentence, you have been through the criminal justice system, I do not believe that you should be punished twice for the same crime by being deported. But I just want to be really clear about the kind of people that are on this flight, because I think it's quite disingenuous and misleading of the government to say that there are serious criminals on this flight and that they...
Well, apparently there's 29.
Yeah, there's 29 people who are definitely on the flight, but the majority of the people on this flight have one-off convictions for things like drug possession. They are not the serious criminals that the government is claiming they are. For example, there's 3 people on the flight who are the primary carer for their partner who is either disabled or has mental health difficulties. There's 2 people at least who are victims of torture and have PTSD. Are these really the hardened criminals?
Well, there's 2 issues there, though. I mean, if we're talking about the crime they've committed, and that yet the defence that they shouldn't be deported is that they're a carer or whatever. First of all, shouldn't we be looking at what the crime is? Because a lot of people would not unreasonably say there's a murderer or a rapist there. I don't care who he's looking after. The state can step in. That person should not be in this country. And I thought that you slightly blurred that, because I'm getting the impression you would campaign against any deportation of a foreigner because they've simply served their jail sentence here, which I don't think is in tune with the public.
I think what we're talking about is 2 slightly different things, because if you are talking about the deportation of someone who is a serious criminal, who has had the right access to justice for themselves, and because everyone has that right, and they have exhausted every other option, then there is an argument that those people could be removed, but in only very severe and extreme circumstances, which is exactly the recommendation that the Lessons Learned Review makes, that these deportations should only occur in the most severe instances. That would mean that charter flights of this nature are absolutely not necessary, because there is no way that you would be getting that kind of case to fill an entire flight.
So where does your campaign go from here? It's clear what your objectives are. What are your tactics to try and win this case, which I have to say I think you're going to struggle to win in the court of public opinion, but will you? Is this something you can take to the courts?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of things that are taking place, hopefully tomorrow, which will be trying to stop the flight based on the fact that the Windrush Lessons Learned Review has not been published. I just saw half an hour ago that 170 MPs have written to the government to say that they object to this flight going, and we hope that will be raised tomorrow in Parliament. But we hope that the flight will be stopped and that the Lessons Learned Review will be published and those recommendations implemented immediately.
And how many of these flights take place, as far as you're aware?
So immediately after the Windrush scandal, these charter flights to the Caribbean were suspended. So one went last year, and this is the second one since the scandal took place. Charter flights to other countries take place on a fairly regular basis, several times a year.
OK, Minnie, thank you very much for joining us and putting over her case as to why offenders should not be deported. I have to say, I think she was on sticky ground, widening it beyond those who have been here since childhood, effectively. And I think that it sounds like it's going to rest with the courts what's going to happen. But I think in the court of public opinion, most people would not unreasonably say, actually, if you've got an offender here, and some would say offender at any level, regardless of whether they've done their time. And I'm inclined to agree with this, is that you are deported because, frankly, this country has given you the chance, hospitality. It wants you to succeed and make a useful contribution here. And if you're not going to do that, hop it.